You can see here that I've changed the names of all of my parts. A trick that you can use to organize things is put an underscore before camera and light. This will ensure that camera and light show up at the top of your scene collection. Everything else, all of your model, will have a triangle next to it and it'll have its name. Again, like I said earlier, these are organized alphabetically. So to begin with material, we're going to start with shell. This outside part is what I named shell, and it's a pretty obvious part for a colorway, so that's where we'll begin. What we're going to do is make sure we're in object mode, click on shell, and then up here, we're going to go to shading. These are your workspaces. So right now we've only been working in layout. However, now we're going to go to shading. Up here, you may find that you're in one of these for default. I usually like to use this fourth one, viewport shading. However, you can use any of them, but these two typically work the best. So, now that we're here, you'll notice this gray gridded area down here. This is where you start editing your material. So to begin, we're going to add some things. The first thing that we're going to add is texture coordinate. So you can go add, search, and look up texture, and there it is. We'll press enter, and then left click to drop it in the scene. Next thing we're going to add is mapping. Search, mapping, same thing. Search again. We'll look up image texture. And we're going to add one more, and this is called normal map. This is a cool part because it helps you maintain texture on your geometry, not just color. So now that we have these options, what we're going to do is you can see these are connected. So for example, we'll connect normal here to normal here, color here to color here, vector here to vector here, and then finally generated into vector. Now you can see that these create different relationships between these different menus. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to open an image texture. Here I'll choose my texture. And I got this image, or this normal, online. For those of you that are unfamiliar with a normal map, the normal map is a pink, blue, purple copy, essentially, of a texture. So you can see that we already have a little bit of a texture. So what we can do, you can see how this has a different attitude or a different material, really, that's the word, different material than the rest of this flat shaded model. So what we're going to do is we can edit all of these menus, enabling us to get a more specific material on really any part of our model. If I come over to this view, it's frustrating because I can't really see the texture. Everything is gray. So what we're going to do is go back to layout. To put it simply, layout is where you put things, and shading is how you apply material to things. So you can switch around, and let's go to our light. Here, you can left click on it and press move. The hotkey for move is G. So we'll move this down and over, so that way we have a light that's more direct onto our headphones. From here, we can view this as well up here. So this is the first option you can use in viewport shading. We have a second, third, and fourth. The third and fourth are the most often and best used for materials because this is the lighting that I've set up for myself. You can see that it's incredibly bright. And this is sample lighting. So it's lighting that essentially is produced artificially to perfectly light your model. So Blender does this for you. But if we go in shading and use that again, I really dislike this HDRI background. But at the same time, it's showing me the background of what I'm in, which is this sphere over here. So I'm not the biggest fan, and I also would prefer to have custom light, the light that I made. So if I have a problem with this and how bright it is, what I can do is come over here, select my light in my scene collection, press the light menu, object data properties, and then I can reduce the power. So let's go to 500, see how that does. It's still pretty bright. So maybe 250, maybe a little bit less. Let's do 150. All right, so here you're getting suggestions of the material. And again, if you're not happy with where this light is, we can go back to layout and move it. So that way we can get more light on the underside of our shell. So that looks good to me. I want a little bit of shadow so I can see how it looks in the shadows. All right, so you can see this is flat, this has material. But our material doesn't look that great because it's fresh and we haven't really done anything to it. Maybe I'll move this light a little bit further back so it's not as strong. So now that we got it, we'll go back to shading and we can zoom in. Here, I'll go down to shell, and now we can start editing. So the first thing that you might want to do is change the color. You can change this in principled BSDF and change it to whatever you'd like. If for some reason you can't find a way to get color on your headphones or the material that you've just applied, what you need to do is make sure you're in layout and object mode. Here, come over to your scene collection and make sure that camera and light are not selected in this. This is very important. Go to cable, left click, hold shift, and left click until you get to shell or whatever you have at the bottom. Now that we have all of this selected, what we can do is go from object mode into edit mode. Now everything is selected. From here, what we have to do is go to UV, left click, and click on Smart UV Project. This should fix your problem with not being able to get color in your material. To get out of here, go back to object mode and click off. Now you should be able to get color when you go back to shading. Now that I've applied materials to every part of my model, I'll take you through the scene collection as well as the shading viewport as to how I did that. But first, let's go to render properties and check out render engine, the difference between cycles and Eevee. Eevee is more commonly used in video games and doesn't pixelate, whereas when I click on cycles, notice it has to pixelate before it produces the image. Cycles is more commonly used in product design, similar to Keyshot, so it's what I'm going to be using today. Now, if we go to shading, we can see how we achieve these materials with these graphs. If I click on this icon, I can apply a material with this menu without having to completely recreate all of these new nodes. So for example, these two share the same material, and I did that with this interface. Now, I'll bring you through all of these parts, and for example, with this, there's a normal map, and I've linked all of these normal maps in the description. If you want to get deeper into editing materials, or if we go to shading and manipulating these menus right here can't get you the style of material that you want, you can go back to layout, have this selected, and select UV editing. Now, you can see how the material or the UV is mapped on to the surface. Now if we select with our left click, select UV, and use tools like pack islands, average island scale, or minimize stretch, we can further manipulate the geometry that maps across the shell of our headphones. But with this being a beginner tutorial, I just wanted to introduce that, and you can get into it on your own. Finally, if we go back to layout, I want to show you the lighting that I'm using in the scene. So, being in object mode and layout, you can see the world axes. And here I have a bigger lamp that's set to 225 and 0.1, and a smaller lamp that's set to 500 and 0.5. This is MW, and this is W.